Well, while we're here, because we have used the get all contact method here, get all contacts, how about the get contact? Just get one. Well, we have IDs now, so let's see how can we just get one contact. Going back to main here, make sure we're not adding anything yet. So at the top there, well, I can come down here. Okay, so you say get one contact. Well, I can come here and say contact, because remember, this one here is a contact type, which means it returns just one contact. Return space there, okay? Very good. So I can come down here and contact. I'm going to say is equal to db.getContact. Notice I have to pass an ID. So let's say if I want to get one of the JSONs that we added there accidentally, I'm going to pass ID 2. Now, you notice that our contact here is going to be JSON. Well, let's see if that is true. Looks like I'm having issue here because I'm using the same contact there. Okay, let's say C, we don't have this issue there of contradiction in naming. All right, so at this point, I can say log D, and I can say c.getName plus c.get phone number, like that. Make sure this is main. Okay, save this. Very simply, you know what's going to happen. Let's see. There we go. There is indeed JSON, and the phone number is that one there. Okay, so things are still working. And of course, if I say 1, right? So if I want to get the first one, run this again, and we should see Jeremy and the phone number. All right, very good. All right, so the next thing we're going to do, let's go back to our database handler here. So we have get contact, and of course we have the add contact. We've used those, and we'll also use the get all contacts. The next we're going to do is the update, because we haven't really updated anything. So I'm going to say here, update contact, right? Because contacts can change and you would want to update. So how do we update something? So to update something here, we're going to do the following. Say public. I'm going to make this an int. The reason why is because once we update something, the system will return the index or the ID of that something, or in this case, that row that was updated. It makes sense. That's why we're going to make this public int type, which means we'll expect to return an int. So I'm going to say update contact. And of course, we need to pass the contact to be updated. So the contact object as such. So what we're going to do, we're going to do the same thing we did before, SQL database, DB, make it writable. So this.get writable, okay, because we need that handle there. We're going to create our content values. I'm going to call these values is equal to new content values. And then we're going to set things up. So I'm going to say values that put, what is it, where we're going to be putting? Well, we're going to be putting the util dot key name. Okay, what is the key? Well, the key is going to be contact.getName. Okay, because that is what we're going to be updating from our contact. So we're getting this contact here, and we're getting the name to put back in our key values here. Okay, very good. So I'm going to say values.put, again, util.key phone number, and we're going to get that from contact, get phone number. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and update the row. What is the row? Something like this. This will be the row that we're going to be updating. Okay. Very good. So in this case here, like I said, because we are updating something, we are returning the ID of that something that we are updating. So I'm going to just go ahead and say return, put all in one line, say DB. There is indeed a method already from our DB, our SQL database here, called update. Very handy. So let's use that. First thing, obviously, we have to pass is the table. You can see up there at the top. So I'm going to say util dot table name, and we're going to pass the values, right? What are the values? What are the values that we just put together? And then we're going to pass in the clause, so the where. Where are we updating? Well, we are updating the ID X, right? How do we get this ID? Well, first of all, let's go ahead and get that field. So util.key ID, that's what we're going to be looking at to update. I'm going to append that, make sure to put equal exclamation mark like that to say the key ID is being expected to be received so that it knows what to update. Okay, and then we're going to pass a new string array there of objects, and we're going to go ahead and pass a few clauses there. What is it that we're going to be passing? Well, this is where we're going to be passing the ID that we need to update, meaning whenever we want to update something, we need to get the ID. That makes sense, because if we don't have the ID, then we don't know what is it that we're updating. Remember, we are using the IDs because we know IDs are the most reliable form of identification, just like a passport really is the most reliable form in many cases. Okay, very good. So in this case here, we're going to do that. So here we're going to go and get the ID from where? Well, the ID we can get from our contact, because remember, when you're updating a contact, we're assuming that the contact already exists on the database. Otherwise, we won't be able to update it, right? So the contact object, notice that has the get name, has the get phone number, but also will have the get key. So here I'm going to go ahead and say contact.get ID. Now we're having a problem here because this, like we said before, it is an array of strings, but this ID is an int. That's why it says required a string found int. We can just go ahead and use the string value, and that would just translate that into actually an integer. So what we're doing here is internally we're saying update, calling that method, and we're passing the table name, and then we have to pass the values that we created at the top here inside of our content values. And then we're going to say where pretty much ID is equal to, say, 2 or 1 or 3 or 43. That is exactly what we're doing here. So this where ID here is actually being added in this where clause, as you can see, because when we say update, these are the parameters we have to pass. It makes sense. We have to pass the table name, where is it or what is it that we're updating, the values, the items that we are updating with, and the where clause. Where is the specific place that we are updating, or the specific row? Well, we say specific row is going to be with ID, this one that we're passing. Now, because we are asking, we say here we're appending equals and the question mark here, because to say that we are actually expecting to pass it in the next line, in the next parameter. That's why we're passing like this. So this contact ID, which we translate into a string, is going to be inside here. That's what we're doing. Let's go ahead and see how to use it. So inside of our main here, we still have this contact C, which should get Jeremy. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to update our contact that we got here. Like I said, it's going to be Jeremy, so you can see. So I'm going to go ahead and say c.setName to new Jeremy. Okay, so c.setName, and I'm going to go ahead and say c.setPhoneNumber to say something like this. Okay, so now that I have actually use whatever we got from get contact with ID 1, so Jeremy, we're going to set to a new thing, new name, and a new phone number. So next I'm going to say db.update contact, and we're going to pass our C, because C now has been updated, but we haven't actually updated inside of our database table. So this is actually going to be int, right? Because remember, our update contact expects to return an int, which is going to be the ID of the updated row. So I'm going to put that inside of this variable. I'm going to say updated row. It's going to be like that. So now I can actually come down here and say log D. I'm going to say updated row. So the row should be 1 because that's the ID of the updated item. I'm going to say row like that. Row ID. Very good. Notice that we still have this list contact and we are iterating through getting all the contacts that we have inside. So this time here, I'm going to just go ahead and say get name for all of the contacts. You will see that we no longer will have Jeremy. We will indeed have Jeremy new because that's what we change it to. And the phone number is going to also be different. Yeah? Let's go ahead and run and see. So run. It's running. And look at that. There's new Jeremy, which is exactly what we did. So the update is working and we should see a number. Let's see, row ID. Row, look at that. Row ID is 1 because indeed we updated Jeremy. right? So the cool thing about this now is that because we said update row ID, we receive that when we update something. It's nice to have that because we can do all sort of things, right? Because we can say, okay, if the ID is correct, meaning that this actually happens, that means the updated happened. So then we can tell the users, for instance, yes, the item was updated, and do all sort of things that we want. Or we can take that ID and do something else on a different table, and so many things you can do with this, okay? But so this is part of the basics. You can see how to do a very simple update. Okay, well, very good. Go ahead and play around with this concept, and I'll see you in the next video.